Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. I love you all. My name is miahtheking, and my boss said, dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. So I went in as Batman. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and if you're wondering why you clicked on this tiny YouTuber's channel, then perhaps it's because of the funny joke at the beginning, or perhaps because I'm one of the few reviewers out there who can help you figure out if you need a game in 10 minutes or less. So stay tuned and find out. Now then, today we're taking a look at a game just released on Steam called New Arc Line, a CRPG, which if you don't know, stands for Computer Role-Playing Game, with a steampunk skin. Looks really good on the store page, so let's dive in, and it looks really good on this title screen too. Developed by Dreammate and published by Fulcrum Publishing, released in early access and selling for $20. So let's just dive right into this sucker, shall we? So what even is this game? Well, the intro was kind of vague, but here's what I got from it. Basically, the world was ruled with magic and fantasy, but humans evolved and started to develop technology, which is the exact opposite of magic. So the two obviously clash. But humans keep pushing and evolving, and technology keeps getting bigger and bigger, and ends up going to war with magic, and magic is weakening as humans are growing more powerful, and some evil plague is the result of all of this. You're some guy who you can customize with a rather in-depth customization screen, which isn't the best, but isn't the worst I've ever seen, who is at the center of all these problems, I think. So now let's just do one of those cliches of already being at the end of our story, but the bulk of the gameplay is going to be set in the past through flashbacks. Yay. Where you're just a smuggler or something. That's the gist of it, without spoilers, and at least enough to give you a general idea of what you're walking into here. I don't really like that whole flashback idea. I don't like that at all, but whatever, that's the setup we got. So as always, let's go into the good and the bad, starting off first with the good. So the first positive point is that price tag. Now, I don't want to spoil the rest of this video, but in summary, there is more than enough content here for that price tag to be considered justified, even as an early access release. I'm going to be honest. When I was waiting for this game to release, I was expecting more like a $40 price tag from the production value on the advertisements alone. So to see $20 for an early access beta test is very, very nice. I'm going to tell you right now, in my opinion, this is probably a $40 game right here, and yet you're only paying 20 bucks for it. So yeah, that's a good deal, that's a good price, that's a good point. Next up for the positives is the sound design. Now it has its good moments, and it has its bad moments. The music is really nice and fits the theme without sounding out of place or obnoxious. It's kind of catchy and really nice and thematic. The sound effects are really good too, though. I wanted to make special mention of them. The roaring dragon, the fire roaring, the gunshot sounds, the ambiance, like that just sounds great. And yes, it does have voice acting, a lot of voice acting, far more than I was expecting, considering there wasn't any voice acting in the opening cinematic, which... Come on, game devs, get that acted ASAP. Also, slow it down. That opening cutscene with all the information and backstory was way too fast to keep up with and retain the information, so please work on that. But anyway, back to the voice acting. This is the ups and downs that I was mentioning. Sometimes it's really good.
Richard, can't you ever keep your trap shut? That's got nothing to do with our business right now. Got it?
I see. What do you want then?
And then sometimes it's really bad.
Are you telling me the scene awaits? No way. For such an opportunity, I'm ready to give you my left hand. Here, take this. Soon, money won't matter to me.
This dwarf had just learned that his dream of becoming an actor was finally coming true thanks to me after years of sadness and disappointment. But did he sound excited or happy? No, he didn't. So yeah, it has its ups and downs, but mostly it's fine. On the whole, like overall, for every voice actor that I've heard so far, I'd say that the overall quality is average. Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's really bad. But at least there's plenty of it, and it's good enough, varied enough out there that it doesn't bug me too much. Next up for the positives is the idea, the lore, the history, the story, the writing, all of it. It's all really well done in my opinion. The idea is incredibly interesting. I've mentioned before in other videos that I love the idea of gunpowder meets magic or technology meets magic, and this kind of scenario with this kind of game and gameplay is exactly what I've been wanting to see for a long time. I love this idea, and the quality of it isn't bad either. It's dark, gritty, realistic, but at the same time, they try to add some goofiness and some comedy and other elements of mystical reality into the overall writing. So far, everything I've seen has been coherent, made sense, and didn't feel out of place or wrong, which really helped to set the mood and immerse you into the story and into the game. They did a great job of building the world, and even the cast of characters are interesting and dynamic. A little cliched at times, but you know, not cringy, so not bad. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the gameplay. It's fairly standard for games of this genre or this type if you're a veteran of these kinds of things. I personally, in my mind, label all these games in this style isometric RPGs because it's just more familiar to me that way, but it's basically what you'd expect. Turn-based combat with unique skills, abilities, weapons, etc., classes you can pick for your character, background professions that shape your character, stats that help you in combat, in dialogue, or throughout exploring the world like persuasion, sleight of hand, or whatever. The game clearly took some inspiration from Baldurs Gate 3, which is good, finally someone out there smart enough to do so with the obvious dice rolls, with the obvious narrator narrating everything that you're seeing or doing.
A young man in an ill-fitting uniform presides, papers strewn before him on the wooden tabletop. With an air of long-practiced indifference, he begins to read from a crumpled form.
With various perks, gameplay objectives and components, and a plethora of other things similar to Baldur's Gate 3, which makes it feel very in-depth and well put together, as well as streamlined and interesting. I've yet to get too deep into the game to experience everything, but so far there's a lot of great potential here, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Now obviously it's an early access, and it still does have some issues with its gameplay. For instance, the combat feels super easy and a bit boring. And for the most part, in these first 2 hours of gameplay, you're kind of just running around, reading dialogue, not really doing a whole lot, just doing fetch quests and stealing from people and stuff, dialogue option quests and stuff like that. But for the most part, you know, it works, I guess, and it's a good foundation for further exploration. And I guess you could say that about most of the gameplay, honestly. Alright, so that's all the time I got for the pros. Now on to the cons. But before that, do me a favor, and if you happen to be finding this video entertaining or at least informative, then consider joining my royal guard by hitting that subscribe button. And hit that bell too. After all, I review random games at random times, and you never know when I'll review that one game that you've been missing out on your whole life. So hit that bell and stay informed. Alright then, now on to the negatives. The first negative for me was the tutorial. To me, it's really garbage. It barely teaches you what you need to know. It does so in the most boring of ways possible, and it leaves out a shit ton of information. Half the time, I'm just guessing or assuming because the game either never taught me or never verified with me. Luckily, I'm very experienced in games like this, so I was able to pick it up pretty quick, but even then, I'm still a bit unsure of a few things, and I can't imagine someone like my mom, for instance, who has no experience with games like these except for Baldur's Gate 3, being able to just pick up this game and slide right into it, so that might need to be adjusted. Next up for the negatives is the graphics. Now before you bite my head off, they're not awful, just not great. For me, the poor contrast and color deviation was kind of droll and boring. And the lack of contrast, making everything seem blurry and inaccurate, just kind of killed the mood for me. With lack of details in places and poor design choices in others, and just overall, I think it needs to be more polished. Next up is the stability, which is probably the game's most glaring flaw and might be the #1 reason why you wouldn't get this game. This thing is so buggy and glitchy, it's a bit ridiculous, even for an early access title. Clicking somewhere will sometimes just have this little reticule pinging incessantly. Characters' bodies and faces just don't match what they're saying or the tone of voice they're using. Then there's the glaring and mind-shattering sound glitches.
A single misstep.
And then we go on to the frame rate dropping. I mean, there's just so many bugs and glitches here that it does make me worry for the future of the game because it might turn off a lot of people. I really hope they get these glitches fixed quickly. Yes, I know it's early access. No, that doesn't negate what I'm saying. And last but not least for the negatives is the user interface. At times it's really good and interesting, like going through the menus, for instance. Like, it looks like books and pages, which is not only realistic and thematic, but also immersive and interesting, as well as different from what we see in a lot of others. Even when you're in your inventory and looking at different items, it's interesting and well designed. But then when you get into like combat, for let's say, and you get this annoying little taskbar with no discernible differences in skills, skill types, or attacks or anything. All of them just the same color, same contrast, indiscernible from one another. And it starts to get a bit more confusing, with the text being way too small even for me with my 20/20 vision, and no way to adjust it in options. In other ways, it's badly designed or unfinished as well. Like here's an example, there's no real indicator of what's marked as stolen loot or free loot. I grab from a box with a white outline, it's okay. I grab from another nearby box with a white outline, and apparently I just stole something with no sign or reason showing me that it would have been stealing in the first place, and it got me into trouble. So the UI definitely needs some work and polishing as well. But that's all I could think of to say negatively about the game at this time. What are my final thoughts? Well, I think this game is a really, really great early access game. It's very broken, and it's very buggy, and it's very unfinished. But for what is there, this game has an amazing foundation. I cannot wait to see this game in its finished state when it's not slogging around, broken, or badly mismatched in some of its interface designs. It's not the next Baldur's Gate 3, but when this game is completed, it'll be a really good replacement when you're done with Baldur's Gate 3, and it could even end up going so far as to saying it's a fantastic game when it's finished. As of right now, I'm not too sure. I mean, is it worth its $20 asking price? Absolutely. Does it have enough content to keep you satisfied over Thanksgiving? Absolutely. Is it a giant shit show? Absolutely not. But it's not finished. It's buggy and broken, and a bit slow in its pacing. I mean, the first couple of hours are really boring with just a bunch of fetch quests and very little combat. But overall, I think this is a decent game with huge potential to become something freaking amazing. Do I recommend it? Yes, I do. I definitely recommend giving the game a try, or at the very least, putting it on your wishlist and keeping an eye on it. The devs are clearly working hard on something special here, and they deserve the support. But if you're still a bit hesitant, I understand that as well. And I would still recommend that you keep an eye on it. This is not a purchase I regret, and I don't think you will either. So make sure you support these talented and dedicated developers, alright? Alright, so that's all the time I got for this video, everybody. Thanks so much for watching, with a special thanks to those of you who stuck around to the end. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I can't wait to see you all again on my next adventure. So until then, I bid you all farewell.